Twin flames. Something just shifted, and you felt it before you understood it. The divine masculine is done chasing, not done caring, not done feeling, done chasing. And that difference is about to shock you, because when pursuit energy disappears, your nervous system doesn't interpret it as maturity. It interprets it as loss. You may already feel it. Less urgency from him, less overextending, less emotional pursuit, more calm, more distance, more neutrality. And part of you is asking, is he pulling away? Is he losing interest? Did something change? Yes, something changed, but not in the way you think. When the divine masculine stops chasing, it doesn't always mean he's walking away. Sometimes it means he stopped reacting, stopped proving, stopped feeding a dynamic that was built on imbalance. For a long time, maybe the connection ran on tension, push and pull, silence and pursuit, distance and reaction. But when a man stabilizes internally, he stops moving from ego pressure. He stops chasing to win. He stops chasing to secure. He stops chasing to avoid losing. And when that happens, the divine feminine feels the shift instantly. Because if you were used to pursuit energy, neutrality feels like withdrawal. If you were used to intensity, calm feels like detachment. If you were used to effort proving love, stability can feel like indifference. But this phase is not about abandonment. It's about recalibration. And here's the uncomfortable truth. When chasing ends, your own attachment patterns become visible. Because now there is no adrenaline, no emotional spike, no constant reassurance through effort, just space. And space exposes. So before you react, before you try to pull energy back, before you test him to see if he still cares, stay with me. Because this shift is either the beginning of maturity or the beginning of a repeated cycle. And how you interpret it will decide which one it becomes. Twin flames. This is not random behavior. This is an energetic shift. And when the divine masculine shifts internally, the dynamic changes externally whether you are ready for it or not. For a long time, the connection may have operated on pursuit energy. There was movement, there was tension, there was reaction, even if inconsistent. There was visible effort driven by emotion. But something subtle has changed. He feels calmer, less reactive, less emotionally urgent, less driven to prove himself through action. And to the divine feminine, that can feel destabilizing. Because when pursuit slows down, your system scans for danger. You wonder if the connection is weakening. You wonder if he is detaching. You wonder if you did something wrong. But this shift is not necessarily withdrawal. It can be internal stabilization. The masculine energy, when immature or ungrounded, chases to regulate ego. He chases to win. He chases to avoid losing. He chases to secure validation. He chases because tension fuels him. But when that ego pressure softens, the external behavior changes. He stops overextending. He stops emotionally performing. He stops reacting immediately to silence. He stops trying to control the outcome through pursuit. And that calm can feel like absence because you were used to intensity. Feminine energy often reads effort as love, reads urgency as desire, reads pursuit as emotional depth. But sometimes urgency was insecurity. Sometimes pursuit was ego. Sometimes intensity was imbalance. When the divine masculine stabilizes, he doesn't chase from fear anymore. He moves from grounded presence. And grounded presence is quiet. It does not beg. It does not prove. It does not over-explain. It simply is. And that neutrality can shock the divine feminine nervous system. Because if you were accustomed to emotional spikes, stability feels flat. If you were accustomed to push and pull, consistency feels unfamiliar. This is where interpretation becomes critical. If you interpret his calm as indifference, you will react from fear. If you interpret his calm as maturity, you will observe from stability. But here is the deeper layer. When the masculine stops chasing, the polarity recalibrates, because chasing often created imbalance. One moving forward, one bracing, one pursuing, one responding. When that motion stops, both energies are forced to stand in themselves. No more adrenaline, no more ego-driven urgency, just presence. And presence exposes attachment patterns. Feminine energy may suddenly feel the urge to pull him back, to test him, to provoke reaction, to see if the desire is still there. Because the absence of chase can feel like loss of power, but it may actually be the beginning of equilibrium. When the divine masculine no longer chases, he is no longer moving from scarcity. He is no longer acting from fear of losing you. He is acting from self-regulation. And self-regulation changes the tone of the entire connection. This is not about him loving less. It is about him operating differently. If he is evolving, he will no longer participate in dynamics fueled by insecurity. He will not chase to soothe ego. He will not overextend to avoid abandonment. He will not react to every emotional fluctuation. And that can feel cold if you expected emotional pursuit as reassurance. But sometimes calm is strength. Sometimes stillness is confidence. Sometimes less is stability. Twin flames, the masculine energy shift, is uncomfortable because it removes adrenaline from the equation. And without adrenaline, you are left with clarity. Does the connection still stand without chase? Does attraction still exist without pressure? Does alignment remain without emotional drama? This shift forces those questions, and how you respond will either stabilize the bond or recreate the old pattern of push and pull. The divine masculine is not disappearing. He may simply be standing in a more grounded version of himself. The real question is, can you stand grounded too? Divine feminine, let's talk honestly. He didn't just wake up one day and stop caring. He stopped chasing. And those are not the same thing. For a long time, his pursuit may have been fueled by tension, by ego, by the fear of losing you, by the need to prove something, by the adrenaline of uncertainty. Chasing creates emotional intensity, and intensity feels like passion. But intensity is not always stability. There comes a point in the masculine evolution where he realizes that chasing from insecurity exhausts him, that proving his value through constant effort drains him, that reacting to emotional pressure keeps him in a loop. And when he reaches that threshold, something shifts. He stops performing. He stops pursuing to win. He stops overextending to secure your validation. And to you, that feels like something disappeared because your nervous system was used to that motion. You were used to him stepping forward quickly, to him reacting when you pulled away, to him increasing effort when tension rose. But when he stabilizes internally, he doesn't move from fear anymore. He doesn't chase to avoid losing. He doesn't chase to compete. He doesn't chase to soothe ego. He begins to observe. He begins to hold. He begins to stand still. And that stillness can feel like detachment, but it may actually be maturity. Divine feminine. If you were subconsciously relying on his pursuit as reassurance, this shift will activate you. You might feel suddenly unsure. You might question whether attraction is fading. You might feel the urge to test him, to see if he will react, to see if he will pursue again. But testing recreates the old pattern, and the old pattern is exactly what he may be stepping out of. When the masculine stops chasing, he is no longer feeding the polarity through pressure. He is recalibrating, because chasing from ego eventually creates imbalance. One gives more, one pulls back, one tries harder, one doubts, and that loop cannot sustain long-term alignment. So sometimes, when he stops chasing, it is not withdrawal, it is recalculation. He is asking himself internally, am I acting from fear or from grounded desire? Am I pursuing because I want her or because I don't want to lose? Am I reacting or am I choosing? And when he chooses groundedness, it looks different. Less dramatic, less intense, less urgent, more calm, more measured, more neutral. And neutrality can shock you if you equate intensity with love. Divine feminine. This is where your attachment patterns surface. If he is not chasing, do you feel unseen? If he is not proving, do you feel insecure? If he is not reacting, do you feel unimportant? Be honest, because the discomfort may not be about him losing interest. It may be about you losing the adrenaline that once reassured you. The masculine shift removes the emotional spike, and without the spike, you are left with clarity. Does he still show up consistently? Does he communicate when grounded? Does he remain present without pressure? If yes, then this is not detachment, it is evolution. But if he withdraws entirely, avoids responsibility, and disappears emotionally, that is not maturity. That is avoidance. And those two are very different. You cannot determine which one it is from panic. You determine it from observation. Divine feminine. When he stops chasing, the dynamic forces you into your own center. Because now there is no one moving energetically toward you to create momentum. You must stand in yourself, without testing, without provoking, without trying to reignite tension. Can you allow calm without interpreting it as loss? Can you allow space without assuming abandonment? Can you allow him to stabilize without destabilizing yourself? This is where polarity becomes clean, not fueled by insecurity, but by grounded presence. If he is evolving, he will not chase from ego anymore. He will move with intention. And intention is slower than impulse. The real question is not why he stopped chasing. The real question is, can you remain stable when the adrenaline disappears? Because if you react from fear, you pull the dynamic backward. If you observe from strength, you allow it to upgrade. And this shift is either the end of an immature pattern or the beginning of one repeating. Your response will decide. Divine Feminine. This is the part no one prepares you for. When he stops chasing, it doesn't just change the dynamic, it activates you. And the activation can feel sharp because when pursuit energy disappears, your system doesn't calmly analyze it. It reacts. You may feel a sudden drop in certainty, a quiet anxiety that wasn't there before, a subtle fear that something is slipping away. Even if nothing dramatic happened, even if he is still present, even if communication still exists. The shift alone is enough to trigger you, because for a long time, his pursuit may have been your emotional reassurance, not consciously, but neurologically. When he chased, you felt chosen. When he reacted, you felt desired. When he proved effort, you felt secure. So when that motion stops, your body interprets it as loss of value, and that's where the shock lives. Not in his behavior, but in what it activates inside you. Divine Feminine, be honest with yourself. If he is calm instead of urgent, does it make you feel less wanted? If he is grounded instead of reactive, does it make you feel uncertain? If he doesn't escalate when you pull back, does it make you question your power? Because sometimes the shock isn't about love fading, it's about control shifting. Chasing created a certain polarity. He moved toward you, you responded. There was emotional tension, there was momentum, there was intensity. Now that intensity is lower, and without intensity, you are left with something quieter, something more stable. But stability can feel unfamiliar if you were used to emotional spikes. The Divine Feminine often thrives in emotional depth, in intensity, in connection that feels alive and charged. But adrenaline is not the same as alignment. And when adrenaline fades, clarity surfaces. The shock happens because you can no longer measure love by pursuit. You can no longer measure desire by urgency. You can no longer measure connection by reaction. And that forces you inward. If he is not chasing, what do you feel? If he is not proving, what surfaces in you? Is it fear of being forgotten? Fear of being replaced? Fear of not being enough? Fear of not being special anymore? These fears don't mean you are weak. They mean something in your attachment system is being exposed. And exposure is uncomfortable because without pursuit energy feeding your reassurance, you must stabilize yourself. Divine Feminine. This is where many women react. They try to pull him back into the old dynamic. They create distance to see if he responds. They test his desire. They provoke emotional reaction because reaction equals reassurance. But testing only recreates the pattern he may be stepping out of. If he is evolving, he will not respond to games. He will respond to groundedness. And that is confronting, because now you are being asked to hold your center without external validation. The shock is not about him loving less. It's about you losing the familiar rhythm. Push, pull, chase, respond. Intensity, reassurance. Now the rhythm is slower, calmer, less dramatic, and your nervous system must recalibrate. Divine Feminine. If he is still present, still consistent, still intentional, just calmer, then this is not detachment. It is stabilization. But if he withdraws responsibility, avoids clarity, and disappears emotionally, that is avoidance. The key difference is consistency, not intensity. Consistency. The shock phase is temporary. It is your system adjusting to a new polarity. But how you respond determines whether this becomes growth or regression. If you panic, you recreate chaos. If you observe, you allow alignment. The end of chasing exposes your internal security. Can you feel desired without constant proof? Can you feel chosen without dramatic effort? Can you trust connection without emotional spikes? That is the real initiation here. Divine Feminine. This moment is not testing your worth. It is testing your stability. Because stable love does not look like constant pursuit. It looks like grounded presence. And grounded presence can feel unfamiliar if you equated intensity with devotion. The shock is not permanent. It is transitional. And once your system stabilizes, you may realize something powerful. You don't need to be chased to be chosen. You need to be aligned to be met. And that shift changes everything. Divine Feminine. Now we need to talk about something uncomfortable. Because not every man who stops chasing has evolved. And not every calm shift is maturity. Sometimes it is ego. Sometimes it is pride. Sometimes it is emotional withdrawal, disguised as strength. And you need clarity. When the divine masculine stops chasing, there are two possible routes: grounded evolution or defensive retreat. They look similar on the surface, but energetically, they are completely different. Maturity feels calm but consistent. Ego feels calm but distant. Maturity holds presence. Ego withholds presence. Maturity is stable without performance. Pride withdraws to regain control. Divine Feminine. If he stopped chasing because he stabilized internally, you will still feel intention. You will still feel quiet consistency. You will still feel subtle movement toward you, just without urgency or emotional spikes. But if he stopped chasing because his ego was bruised, because he felt rejected, because he wants to protect himself or regain leverage, you will feel the difference. It will feel colder, more detached, less emotionally available, not grounded, guarded. And this is where your discernment matters. Because if you assume maturity when it is ego, you over-accommodate. And if you assume ego when it is maturity, you overreact. So let's break it down. When pride is involved, he pulls back to restore control. He stops chasing to avoid vulnerability. He stops initiating to see if you will. He reduces effort not from peace, but from wounded self-protection. And pride rarely communicates clearly. It withholds. It waits. It monitors. It wants to see if you feel the absence, because absence becomes power in ego dynamics. But grounded masculinity does not play power games. Grounded masculinity does not withdraw to punish. It does not create silence to provoke reaction. It simply moves with intention. Divine Feminine. This is why you must stay regulated. If he is operating from ego and you react emotionally, you feed the power struggle. If he is operating from maturity and you react emotionally, you destabilize the upgrade. Your stability is the filter. If he withdraws emotionally and you feel confused, anxious, and destabilized, pause. Ask yourself, is he still consistent in baseline behavior? Is he still respectful? Is he still present when engaged? Or has emotional availability decreased entirely? Withdrawal from ego feels tense. Withdrawal from maturity feels calm. One feels like distance growing. The other feels like space being respected. And here is the deeper layer. Sometimes the masculine moves through a pride phase before true maturity. He stops chasing because he is tired of feeling vulnerable. He stops pursuing because he felt unseen. He stops initiating because he fears rejection. And instead of communicating that fear, he chooses silence. That is not evolution. That is avoidance. But even avoidance has a purpose. It exposes whether you will chase him to restore imbalance, or whether you will remain steady and allow clarity to surface. Divine Feminine. If you chase when he withdraws from pride, you reestablish imbalance. If you panic when he stabilizes, you create instability. But if you remain grounded, you force truth to reveal itself. Because ego cannot sustain long-term stillness without tension leaking through, and maturity cannot hide consistency. Watch patterns, not moments. Ego fluctuates emotionally. Maturity remains measured. Ego seeks validation through silence. Maturity does not require performance, and most importantly, mature masculine energy does not disappear. It may slow down, it may stabilize, it may reduce emotional theatrics, but it does not vanish. If emotional presence disappears completely, that is not groundedness. That is retreat, and retreat is not union. Divine Feminine, your role is not to diagnose him. It is to stabilize yourself. When you remain steady, you allow ego to burn itself out, or you allow maturity to strengthen. In both cases, you gain clarity. Do not rush to label. Observe. Do not rush to react. Stabilize. Because if this shift is growth, your calm will align with it. If it is pride, your calm will expose it. Either way, you do not lose. The only way you lose is by reacting from fear and recreating imbalance. And this phase is not about chasing him back. It is about seeing clearly. Is he grounded or is he guarded? Your nervous system knows the difference when it is not panicking. Stay centered. Truth reveals itself quickly when you do. Divine Feminine. This is where you must remove emotion from interpretation, because your fear will label stability as abandonment, and your attachment may label avoidance as him needing space. You need discernment. When the divine masculine stops chasing, you are standing at a fork in the road. Either he has matured or he has withdrawn, and those two are not the same. Maturity feels grounded. Avoidance feels disconnected. Maturity reduces drama. Avoidance reduces presence. Maturity slows down but remains intentional. Avoidance slows down and becomes inconsistent. You have to feel the baseline. If he is mature, he may not chase, but he will still show up. He will still communicate. He will still move with quiet consistency. He will not react to emotional spikes, but he will not disappear either. There is stability in him. There is calmness. There is less urgency, but not less care. Avoidance, on the other hand, removes emotional investment. It feels like effort has thinned out, like engagement is surface level, like he is technically there, but energetically absent. And that is a very different frequency. Divine Feminine. Here is the key question. Is he less intense or less available? Less intensity can be growth. Less availability is retreat. Intensity is emotional charge. Availability is presence. One can decrease without harming the connection. The other cannot. When a man matures, he does not chase from ego anymore. He doesn't escalate to prove desire. He doesn't pursue to soothe insecurity, but he still values what he wants. He just moves without adrenaline. Avoidant energy, however, reduces pursuit because vulnerability feels threatening. It withdraws not from peace, but from fear. And fear-based withdrawal always feels slightly tense, even in silence. Divine Feminine. Your nervous system can tell the difference when you are not panicking. Mature masculine energy feels steady, even if slower. Avoidant masculine energy feels unstable, even if quiet. Maturity will not punish you with silence. Avoidance might. Maturity does not test your loyalty. Avoidance might pull back to see if you chase. Maturity doesn't need leverage. Avoidance seeks control. This is where you must regulate before interpreting. If you panic, you will misread everything. If you stabilize, you will see clearly. Ask yourself, is he still consistent over time? Is he still respectful? Does he still initiate in his own rhythm? Does he still maintain connection without being prompted? Or has effort become minimal? Has clarity decreased? Has responsibility faded? Those answers matter more than emotional intensity. Divine Feminine. Do not confuse calm with detachment, but also do not romanticize detachment as growth. This phase is exposing the truth. If he matured, your stability will align with his. If he is avoiding, your stability will expose it. Because when you do chase, and he does not step forward at all, clarity becomes undeniable. And clarity is power. The worst thing you can do right now is react to test him. Testing recreates ego. Testing recreates imbalance. Testing pulls the dynamic back into insecurity. Instead, observe. Give space without drama. Hold your center without manipulation. If he is grounded, he will meet you there. If he is avoiding, he will remain distant. Either outcome gives you truth, and truth is better than adrenaline. Divine Feminine. Sometimes the chase ending is the beginning of maturity. Sometimes it is the exposure of emotional immaturity. But you cannot see which one it is if you are reacting from fear. Remove urgency, remove panic. Remove the need to immediately define what this shift means. Watch behavior over time, not moments, not moods, not single days. Patterns reveal maturity. Consistency reveals intention, and avoidance reveals itself when no grounded action follows calm. The end of chasing is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of clarity, and your role is not to pull him back into motion. It is to remain steady and let truth surface. Because the masculine who is ready will step forward without ego, and the one who is not will fade without you having to chase. And in both scenarios, you remain sovereign, divine, feminine. When chasing stops, power shifts, and that shift can feel unsettling. For a long time, the dynamic may have been fueled by movement, one leaning in, one pulling away, one reacting, one pursuing, one emotionally activated, one emotionally contained. That motion created polarity, but it also created imbalance. Because when someone is always chasing, they are giving power away. And when someone is always being chased, they unconsciously hold control. Now something has changed. The pursuit slowed down, the urgency decreased, the emotional pressure softened, and suddenly the dynamic feels different. That difference is recalibration. When the divine masculine stops chasing, he is no longer feeding the polarity through effort alone. He is standing still. And when he stands still, you must stand in yourself. There is no longer adrenaline pushing the connection forward. No more emotional spikes creating intensity. No more dramatic energy swings maintaining attraction through tension. Now there is space, and space reveals imbalance. Divine feminine. If you were used to holding the emotional center while he pursued, you now feel the absence of that motion. If you were used to being chosen through effort, you now feel the quiet of neutrality. If you were used to his reactions validating your importance, you now face stillness. And stillness forces equality, because now no one is chasing, no one is pulling, no one is escalating. The field becomes neutral, and neutrality can feel like loss of power, but it is actually redistribution. True polarity is not built on chase. It is built on grounded presence. When both energies stand stable, attraction becomes cleaner, not driven by insecurity, not driven by ego, but driven by alignment. Divine feminine. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes you felt powerful because he chased. You felt desired because he moved toward you. You felt chosen because he reacted to you. But if your sense of security depended on pursuit, then power was uneven. When he stops chasing, you lose the external validation loop, and that can activate you. Because now you cannot measure desire by motion. You must feel it through consistency. Recalibration removes the dramatic tension that once kept the connection alive. And without tension, you are left with reality. Is he still intentional? Is he still consistent? Is he still present? If yes, then this is balance emerging. If no, then this is clarity emerging. Either way, the old dynamic cannot survive this shift. Divine feminine, power in a twin flame connection is not dominance. It is stability. When both stand in grounded energy, neither needs to chase. Neither needs to test. Neither needs to provoke reaction. There is mutual movement, not ego movement, but conscious movement. The recalibration phase feels uncomfortable because you cannot lean on old habits. You cannot pull back to trigger pursuit. You cannot escalate to provoke reassurance. You cannot manipulate energy to feel secure. Now you must stand still. And standing still reveals whether attraction was based on imbalance or alignment. This is where many dynamics either mature or collapse. If he stopped chasing because he is stabilizing, your stability will harmonize with his. If he stopped chasing because he is withdrawing, your stability will expose the gap. But the key is this: you cannot recalibrate from panic. If you react emotionally to the power shift, you recreate the old imbalance. If you remain grounded, you allow the new structure to form. Divine feminine. This is not about losing control. It is about losing illusion. The illusion that intensity equals love. The illusion that pursuit equals devotion. The illusion that emotional spikes equal connection. Recalibration replaces illusion with clarity, and clarity feels quiet, less dramatic, less chaotic, more real. When chasing ends, equality begins. But equality requires both energies to stand in maturity, and maturity feels different from adrenaline. The connection now asks, can you remain magnetic without being chased? Can you feel desired without dramatic proof? Can you hold presence without controlling movement? Because true power does not come from being pursued. It comes from being grounded. And grounded energy does not need to chase or be chased. It simply aligns. Divine feminine. This is where everything can either stabilize or collapse back into the old pattern. When the divine masculine stops chasing, your first instinct might not be calm. It might be activation. You may feel the urge to do something, to pull energy back, to create movement, to test him, to withdraw slightly and see if he reacts, to send a message that subtly demands reassurance. And none of those impulses make you weak. They make you human. But reacting will reset the dynamic. Responding will elevate it. There is a difference. Reaction is driven by fear. Response is driven by awareness. Reaction wants immediate relief. Response tolerates temporary discomfort. Reaction seeks validation. Response maintains sovereignty. Divine Feminine. Before you move, pause. Before you send anything, regulate. Before you interpret, breathe. Because the moment you act from activation, you reintroduce imbalance. If he is stabilizing and you react emotionally, you destabilize the upgrade. If he is avoiding and you react emotionally, you feed the ego dynamic. In both cases, panic works against you. So how do you respond without reacting? First, observe behavior over time. Do not judge based on one day. Do not conclude based on one silence. Do not assume based on one shift in tone. Watch patterns. Consistency tells you more than intensity ever will. Second, maintain your rhythm. Do not overextend to compensate for his reduced chase. Do not reduce yourself to provoke pursuit. Stay consistent in your communication. Stay consistent in your energy. Stay consistent in your boundaries. Neutrality is powerful, not coldness, not indifference. Neutral, grounded presence. Third, do not test. Testing recreates insecurity. Testing pulls the dynamic back into ego. If you pull back just to see if he chases, you are still operating from imbalance. If you escalate just to see if he reacts, you are still operating from fear. Divine Feminine. If he is evolving, he will not respond to emotional games. He will respond to stability. And if he is avoiding, your stability will expose it quickly. That is the advantage of responding instead of reacting. You gain clarity without chaos. Fourth, separate ego from intuition. Your ego wants reassurance. Your intuition feels consistency. Ego screams. Intuition observes. If your impulse feels urgent, sharp, emotionally charged, pause. If your clarity feels calm, measured and grounded, act. Response is calm. Reaction is loud. 5th, allow space without catastrophizing. Space is not always loss. Silence is not always rejection. Less intensity is not always less love. If he is consistent but calmer, that is growth. If he is inconsistent and detached, that is truth. Both scenarios require your stability. Divine Feminine, your power in this phase is not in chasing him back. It is in not chasing at all. Not emotionally, not energetically, not subtly. When you remain centered, you remove the adrenaline from the field. And without adrenaline, only truth remains. If he is ready, he will step forward intentionally. If he is not, he will remain stagnant. But you will not have to force clarity. It will reveal itself. The biggest mistake you can make right now is to act out of fear of losing. Because fear-driven movement lowers your frequency. It reopens insecurity. It destabilizes polarity. Instead, hold your center. Let him move from grounded intention. If he does, meet him calmly. If he doesn't, observe quietly. Divine Feminine. This phase is not about proving you are unbothered. It is about actually being regulated. It is not about pretending you do not care. It is about caring without losing yourself. The chase ending is not a threat. It is a test of maturity. Can you stand steady when intensity fades? Can you trust consistency over drama? Can you allow grounded energy to replace emotional spikes? If you can, the dynamic upgrades. If you cannot, the old pattern returns. And this moment is your turning point. Respond with stability, not fear. Because your regulation decides whether this shift becomes evolution or repetition. Divine Feminine, this is the question underneath everything. If he stopped chasing, what does this mean for union? Does it mean the connection is fading? Does it mean he is pulling away permanently? Does it mean something broke? Not necessarily. Sometimes, the end of chasing is the beginning of something healthier. Because union cannot be built on adrenaline. It cannot be sustained by ego pursuit. It cannot mature through emotional spikes alone. Union requires two grounded individuals, not one chasing and one reacting, not one proving and one doubting, not one pursuing and one testing. When the divine masculine stops chasing from insecurity, the field is being prepared for equality. And equality feels quieter, less dramatic, less chaotic, more stable. But here is the truth. Union is not activated by pursuit. It is activated by alignment. If he stopped chasing because he matured, this is a positive shift. It means he no longer wants a dynamic fueled by ego pressure. It means he is choosing intention over reaction. It means he is moving from grounded desire instead of fear of losing. That is closer to union. But if he stopped chasing because he is avoiding vulnerability, because he is emotionally retreating, because he wants control without responsibility, that is not alignment. That is distance revealing itself. And that clarity, while uncomfortable, is still powerful. Divine Feminine, union is not about intensity. It is about stability. It is not about how fast he moves. It is about how consistently he shows up. It is not about how dramatic the connection feels. It is about how grounded it becomes. When chasing ends, the illusion of momentum fades. You can no longer confuse movement with progress. Now you must look at foundation. Is there communication without pressure? Is there effort without ego? Is there presence without drama? If yes, this shift is maturing the connection. If no, this shift is exposing incompatibility. Either way, truth moves you forward. Union does not respond to fear. It responds to sovereignty. When you remain stable, you allow the right outcome to emerge naturally. If he is meant to step into higher responsibility, he will, without being forced, without being tested, without being chased back into imbalance. If he is not ready, the absence of pursuit will eventually become absence of effort, and you will see clearly. Divine Feminine, you cannot build union by pulling him forward. You cannot build union by creating emotional spikes. You cannot build union by performing indifference. Union forms when both energies are internally regulated, when both can stand without ego games, when both move intentionally, not reactively. The end of chasing removes the illusion. Now you see what remains without adrenaline. Does desire remain? Does intention remain? Does presence remain? If yes, the connection deepens quietly. If no, the connection dissolves honestly. Both outcomes are evolution, because true union is not about clinging. It is about alignment. And alignment does not require chase. It requires maturity. Divine Feminine, this shift is not here to scare you. It is here to clarify. The masculine stopping pursuit forces you into your own center, forces you to stabilize, forces you to detach from intensity as proof of love. And when you stabilize, you no longer need to be chased to feel chosen. You feel chosen because you choose yourself. That energy is magnetic. That energy is sovereign. And that energy attracts union, not from insecurity, but from strength. If he is evolving, he will meet you in that frequency. If he is not, you will outgrow the dynamic without chaos. Either way, you do not lose, you elevate. Because union is not built on chase. It is built on two grounded energies choosing each other without ego. And if this phase is uncomfortable, it is because the connection is being refined, not fueled. Refined, stay steady, stay observant, stay sovereign. The end of chasing is not the end of possibility. It is the end of imbalance. And what survives after imbalance dissolves is either true alignment or necessary clarity. Both move you closer to the right union,